to wholesale, do we not? Tonight? All right. I'm going to bring up a really terrific friend of mine. He's been doing this real estate grind for don't want to date him, but let's just say over 2 decades. So he definitely knows his stuff. He is a author, a speaker, and a coach, and a mentor. He's going to be doing our wholesaling workshop coming up in April. He's going to tell you a little bit about that. So for right now, please have a warm Chattanooga welcome for Mr. Russ Hiner.
Thank you. I appreciate it. What kind of freedom?
Well, just time freedom and financial freedom.
Okay. All right. When you say time, you're thinking more about being able to do what you want when you want it,
Exactly.
right?
Wealth means passing down assets to the next generations. It's generational wealth. It's not right now. It's money that's going to last you through the generations of your family.
Okay, so there's a legacy. Excellent, excellent. All right. Well, I definitely want you to be wealthy, and I'm going to give you guys a super opportunity. All right. I want you to think about this saying, the first $1 million is the hardest. Have you ever heard that say? Yeah, okay. So here's $1 million, pass it around. Now, you're gonna walk out of here with $1 million. What are you gonna do tomorrow? Think about this. Because if I was to say, if I was to really write you guys a check for $1 million and then demand that you come back into the room next year, same time, same place, what would your first expectation of that meeting be? You'd want another $1 million, right? Okay, that's not how this works. It doesn't work that way at all. You have to take action in order to be able to reap the rewards. Now, real estate has done me very well, and I'll talk about what real estate has done for me. But I want you to know that typically when we think about wealth, it starts out with just the financial aspect of it. But in my life, there's 4 things that you talk about when you talk about wealth. Because you can have lots and lots of money, but if you're not employing it and deploying it into the community, either through lending or through tithing or towards helping others, what's going to happen? You're going to become a miser. And then your whole world becomes imploding, and it's not a very pretty picture. You also have to be comfortable with the money. How many of you feel comfortable with $1 million? Okay, those of you that did not raise your hand, give me the $1 million back, because you can't even feel comfortable with that. All right. So the next part of it is a relationship. That we are humans. As humans, we like other people. So we need to have relationships. Real estate is a relationship business. If you don't have a relationship with a seller, a trust relationship with a buyer, trust in hiring contractors, what's going to happen to your business? It's going to tank. It's not going to exist. Now, there was a gentleman called Steve Jobs. Anybody remember him? He started a small company that was a fruit. And then he sold his stuff we didn't need. But how many of you, if you lose that thing in between the car seat and you're driving down the highway, you're paying more attention to trying to get it out? Yeah. All right. So Steve Jobs happened to be one of the wealthiest men in America. And when he got liver cancer, what happened was that he did a lot of experimental cancer type drugs. He would have given the majority of his wealth away in order to live another day. So think about this. What are you going to do? If you are not able to travel and enjoy the freedom that you talked about, what's going to happen to your life? It's not going to be a really exciting life, is it? Not at all. All right. So let me talk to you just a little bit about who I am. I have been doing real estate for approximately 34 years. I started out as a slumlord. Now, the reason I mention a slumlord is this. What happened is that I bought apartment buildings and I barely kind of made it go by. But I did learn one thing one day when I was standing and being picked for a juror. Now, I'd been picked as a juror for 4 years straight, and I'm self-employed. If I'm not on the street working, then there's no money coming in. If I own apartments, then there's mailbox money, but the majority of my money comes in from wholesaling and buying and selling and fixing of houses. All right, so I was standing there as a juror, a potential juror, and one of the attorneys asked me, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a slumlord." And pretty much everybody in the room looked at me. And guess what? I have not been required to come since then. So real estate is a good thing to keep you off of jury duty, okay? All right, so I started out in the medical industry, and what happened to me is that I was working for a Fortune 500 company. I was working, and I could see this wonderful corporate ladder that I was going to climb. I was getting the right education. I was doing all this fabulous stuff. Well, what happened is 1 year later, they came in and they said, "Okay, we're laying everybody off and we're draining the pool. If you want to stay with this company, you got to move to King of Prussia, Pennsylvania." All right, so one of my first rules is that if it snows after my birthday, I don't live there. So I live in Atlanta, and it does not snow after my birthday. All right. So my why in real estate is very simple. I want to provide safe, secure housing for individuals. I want to allow the community to change. I want it to change for the better. I not only provide for rental houses, but houses that are fixed up. And I want to make a change in the community for the better. Does that make sense? But I'm a Rotarian, and part of Rotary, how many people know what Rotary is? All right. Well, part of Rotary's mission is to give back. And part of my giving back is that I happen to be on the human trafficking. I also happen to be reading with, there's a reading or an essay where children in the high schools, 9, 10, 11, and 12, write these essays, and then they get $1,000 if they're picked. So it helps inspire them to write. Now, I want you to understand that part of who I am is I have dyslexia and I have ADD. So what happened is that I was married, and that's when my wife discovered that I had dyslexia. Well, I got divorced, and then a couple of years later, I got involved with another woman that I was in love with, and she found out that I was ADD. So I haven't been dating or doing anything. I don't need any more diagnoses, okay? But here's the thing. No excuses. Does that make sense? If you are passionate about something, what will happen is you will find the energy. And if you are not passionate about it, there is nothing that is going to motivate you. And I get motivated because I like looking at houses. I like negotiations. I like structuring deals. I like talking to people. So that's the reason why I got involved in real estate. Now, I didn't get started in wholesale. I did wholesale by accident. So what is wholesale? Wholesale is being able to take a piece of property and not get your hands dirty. Taking a piece of property that you've never seen and sell it and make a profit. Wholesaling is not becoming on title. Now, I will talk about a technique called a double closing a little bit later, but think about this, that what you're really selling in wholesale is a sheet of paper. Now, how many of you believe that a sheet of paper can be worth $5,000? Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. All right. I'll be talking about some of the successes of the people that I've trained and mentored. Now, understand that when you're the middleman in the transaction, and that's why you get paid. So what happens is that you're going to take one sheet of paper and have an agreement with the seller. Then you're going to have a separate sheet of paper, and that's going to be where you assign that sheet of paper to the buyer. And that is your protection, all right? So we're also, when you come to the training in April, we're going to be talking about some of the protections and some of the other paperwork you might need to protect yourself with the seller and also for a buyer so that they don't go around you, all right? That happens periodically, and it's not happened very much in my life because I make sure that the people that I'm working with have integrity and that they are very hungry for the deal. That always is a little bit more. Now, some of you are thinking, well, you know, how do I know a good deal? Well, I can tell you that when you guys were pitching the deals just a moment ago, if it was a absolutely incredible deal, there would have been 3 or 4 people that would have immediately gone over and said, I'll take it. You see the difference? If you're wholesaling an average deal, it will take a little bit longer. If you're wholesaling and a fabulous deal, and I'm talking about leaving a lot of meat on the bone, where there's profitability for the buyer, then what will happen is that you'll sell that agreement very, very quickly. All right? So your whole purpose here is to build a relationship with the seller and with your buyers. All right? You're not going to get wealthy overnight. You will do a transaction in 30 days where you will make more money than you do in a quarter in your regular job. Does that make sense? Yeah, think about that just for a minute. And that's going to entice you to quit. And I'm not saying that you should. But understand that when we do start making money, it's better than being just over broke or having a job. And that's the thing. This is a gateway for you to be able to get involved. Now, understand that the reason that I do wholesaling is this. I do a lot of marketing. I spend approximately $5,000 a month on marketing. All right, well, my marketing is so large that I get deals out in the middle of nowhere where I do not want to drive. All right, I'm basically lazy. So what I do is I wholesale those transactions. And then there are the dogs that I don't like. I know certain areas of town that I'm not real fond of. Well, I wholesale those out. So that way my life is simpler and easier because I choose the cherries. The ones that have high profitability, and that when I put my thumbprint on them, I get excited. So that's what you're going to be looking for. I'm not saying that you need to use $5,000 in order to be able to do your marketing, but that number keeps me in the kind of cash flow that I need. All right? So you are going to have to work at it. It's not going to happen overnight. Nobody is going to hand you this. You're going to have to develop your own relationships. So let's just talk a little bit about the success model. Think about this, that if you only make one phone call at 12 noon every week, what's the chances that you're going to have a wholesale deal quickly? Not at all. It's a numbers game. You have to talk to a lot of people. So let's talk about consistency. Does consistency mean that you make a phone call, you always do your phone calls starting at 1 o'clock and then go to 2 o'clock? No. You do your phone calls on Monday at 9, on Tuesday you do them at noon, on Wednesday you do them at 3 o'clock, at Thursday you do them at 5, and the reason is that there's people that work. And you need to be able to be in contact with them. The other part about it is that I have found recently that there's a longer sales cycle. Anybody that knows what that term is? Has anybody ever heard of that? Okay. So what it actually means for those that you don't know is that the first time you touch an individual till the time that you get paid, that's a sales cycle. And it is getting longer and longer because we don't trust each other. And that's okay. So that means that you're going to have to touch somebody 6 times. And you're going to have to be consistent in what you say. You can't be doing the razzle-dazzle and then changing your story. You have to be very consistent in doing it. So your plan that you must come up with is, what area of town are you going to start with? How many phone calls are you going to make? How many flyers? How many signs? What type of marketing are you going to do? Understand that wholesale can be done with almost nothing out of your pocket except for a cell phone and access to copies. That's pretty much it. Because the cell phone does just a wonderful job of tracking, if you have the right kind of tracker on it, the right kind of app. But the bottom line is this. I am sure that there are some of you in the audience right now that are thinking, oh no, this just doesn't work. Well, the only reason it doesn't work is because you don't believe it. So do yourself a favor. and this is what I tell a lot of the people that I work with. If you don't believe it's going to happen here in Chattanooga, move to a place where you think it will happen. And guess what? It will happen. It's all up here, and it's the way that you talk to people. If you come up to a seller and you say, hey, Will, you know, I see your house, and you wouldn't want to sell it for 32, would you? What did I just do? You wouldn't want to sell it. What seed did I just plant in his head? No, he ain't selling it for 32. All right, so you need to use and be true to your words and start thinking about the words that come out of your mouth. All right, so I happen to be a mentor. I was a mentor with Russ Whitney and Robert Kiyosaki. I flew around all over the United States. I would fly into a city and in 3 days come up with a deal, a good deal. And I was consistently good at that. I saw 48 states doing that. So my point here is that I had this individual that was blind. Now, how many of you are blind? Okay, so you don't have any excuses. Because I was flabbergasted. When I first sat down with him and realized I'm working with a blind person, how am I going to do this? And I started talking to him about his business model. He hires pretty much everything out. He has to. But he hires only people that he trusts. So I want you to think about this in your own business. How many of you hate making cold calls? Guess what? Hire it out. How many of you hate doing bookkeeping? Yeah, hire it out. So the things that you don't like doing, find somebody in the room that likes doing it. And then hire them or partnership with them. That's all in the relationship. All right, now I had another guy that I met in Cincinnati, and he didn't have a car. He didn't have a bicycle. He had bus tokens. And what we did was we went through the neighborhoods and got on the bus and got off the bus and walked neighborhoods in order to build a list of inventory. How many of you, I know that public transportation here, do you have it? It's very, very close to the inner city, right? Okay, excellent place to start. Out in your rural areas, how many of you have a bike? All right, most Americans are obese. It is a great plan for being healthy, like I mentioned earlier, and getting out on the street and getting out there and actually building a list of sellers. Are you with me? Okay. All right, so I have this other individual, and the individual's name is Ton Mitchell. She had no experience whatsoever in real estate. However, she had a business kind of background. And she, in 1 year, put together $500,000 worth of real estate. So my point here is, some of you are saying, well, I don't know anything about real estate. You don't need it. You need to know about a human being and developing a relationship. That's the most important part. All right? The second part is that you don't have to have any skills. You can hire it out. All right? I mentioned to you that I have dyslexia. Right. Am I good at reading? I know how to control it, so I'm much better at it. But it's one of those things that you have to learn what your weaknesses are, and you hire those out. All right? I have been a coach and a mentor for approximately 14 years, I believe, and I have mentored over 1,000 people. I have mentored people that were already millionaires, and I made them multimillionaires, and then there were people that didn't have very much, and I made them millionaires. But I didn't make them. It was them. I just added the salt and gave them a swift kick, and they got there. All right, so let's talk about marketing. I'm going to show you a marketing piece that I have in just a moment. But you've got to figure out what your marketing is. You have to figure out what you're going to say. By the way, the best place or words that you should use in marketing is to steal it from somebody, borrow it from somebody else. We buy houses for cash. How many times have you heard that? It works. I only do things that work. Does that make sense? So you should be doing that. Yes?
What do you think about bandit signs?
Bandit signs I absolutely love.
You think handwritten is better than the printed one?
Excellent question. All right, so we buy houses for cash. All right, you got that in your mind? If it's handwritten, do you think they got money to buy houses for cash? Heck no. It's got to be professionally done. However, if you're selling that house and it's handwritten, you're doggone right, because it makes it look like you're desperate. And everybody wants a good deal. See the difference? I tested that. That's how come I know. All right, coming to networking events like this. This is huge. Going to meetups. That's also huge. By getting to know and talking with people, you'll find out exactly who has real estate and who needs to sell real estate. You can also go through the legal ads, you know, the divorces, the probate, the foreclosures, they all work. What we're looking for is distressed owners. And the reason is that we need a great price. We need a very low price. And the only time that people are motivated to sell at a low price is when they're distressed. Make sense? Now, there's two different types. There is a distressed seller, and I'll talk about them in just a moment. But there's also a distressed house, right? Are distressed houses easy to see? Easy to point out? They sure are, definitely. How many of you are familiar with the blue roof? Yeah, that's distress, because that's an expensive project. But it's an opportunity for you to be able to get your foot in the door and talk to people. All right? Now, the realtor, I'm not excited about in my own business, but I want you to know that I have a competitor in Atlanta that all they do is through a realtor. They make somewhere between 10 to 20 offers every day through a realtor. But they are not in the price point of 100 or 100 and above. Does that make sense? They are down in the 12, the 40, 45, 50 range. And there aren't a lot of people that can walk in and say, I'll pay cash, close on Thursday. And that's their advantage. That's the type of offers that they write. All right? So this is one of the people that I worked with that got paid. They got paid twice on this particular deal. So they were very excited. All right, this is one of my marketing pieces. All right, how do you feel about this? Is this a little bit strong? Is this sends kind of a message? Okay, now this is my foreclosure card. All right, understand that it is their last shot. All right, now here in Tennessee, I understand that you have it's a judicial state, so you've got a lot longer. So you wouldn't mail this until the last month. Does that make sense? Because by then they probably burned up all of their other resources. All right? So you might want to take a photograph of this particular slide. This is what's called a distressed seller. They have these traits. You can read them. The reason that this is important is that you can go to the local instrument and get these here, all right? The one about downsizing, not so much, but wait a minute, you can. Have you ever gone into a neighborhood where every house looks like an old person lives there, right? And then you go on Saturday and there's all these old people out in their yards doing yard work, right? That is a perfect opportunity for going into the downsizing. We talked about a distressed house. All right, I want to tell you my love story. I happened to have this woman call me up, and she wanted to sell. She was calling off my marketing, and I was excited, and she needed to sell. She needed to get to Florida. And I talked to her, and she was motivated. Everything was going great. And then I asked her, what are you going to do with the money when you sell the property? She says, I'm moving to Florida to get married. And I'm thinking, yep, right there, love. Love will make you do some amazing things, right? All right, so you can go to your legal instrument and figure out who has the delinquent taxes or the mortgages. All right, have you found that the baby boomers are now becoming more ill? They have health issues. Yeah, so you might want to be able to develop a relationship and talk to different people, especially if you are a volunteer and giving on a helpline. That's always a good area to get some information. Inheritance, probate, another way of saying that. All right, so let's talk a minute about scripts. What do you have to say to the seller in order to get them to sell you their house? Anybody? I'm sure. How many in the room have done wholesaling in the past? Okay, great, great. So what kind of scripts did you use? Let me hear from you. Yeah. You raised your hand. Yeah.
Mainly, I think what I try to do is just, there's a series of questions I go through just to get at what is their situation, what are they looking for, why are they moving, or why are they selling, you know, how fast do they need to sell?
Yeah, how fast they need to sell indicates the motivation. If they're like, you know, I'll wait until I get my price, is that somebody motivated? Okay, if they play the cat and mouse game with you, well, you sent me the card, what do you want to pay for it? It's kind of like, look, I don't want to waste your time because I'll pay you $1 American. How does that work for you? Click. Yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, great. So I want you to know that if people play that cat and mouse game, they're not motivated. If you've ever worked with a motivated individual, they will tell you everything and more than you really care to know. Yeah, yeah. All right, so you got to have some forms, contracts. That's that paperwork I talked about a little bit earlier. We'll talk about that in a moment. We talked about the plan, the area, the price point. Yeah, Chris?
So what's your advice on like skip tracing?
Skip tracing is the way of the truth and the light. That is probably the best technique I'm using right now.
Because people, it's like, you know, it's still something I haven't done a lot of.
You need to do more.
But it's, yeah, but it's just like, call somebody and they're like, you know, what if they're like, well, how'd you get my number, you know? And I'm like,
Oh, it's all over the internet.
yeah, I know.
It's all over the internet. That's what I say. Yeah. Right, and that, great, I won't call you anymore. But you don't mind me sending you a card, do you?
You could be answering their prayers. It could be looking for somebody.
Right, and Chris, you bring up a very good point. And the point is that right now, today, they are bulletproof. You know what I mean? Their life is just so together and perfect. You know, they're living the dream. And then in the next moment, they're in a car accident. A spouse dies, a parent dies, they collapse. Wait a minute, they lose their job. They collapse. What happened? Typically, do you remember that thing called the government shutdown that just recently happened? How many times did you see on the news that the individuals that were out of a job, they weren't getting a paycheck, they were suffering in less than 15 days. They didn't know where they were going to get their next meal. Do you realize that the majority of Americans happen to be able, or they are on a program to be able to declare bankruptcy in 30 days because they don't have the money saved up? So my philosophy is you send them, the people that don't like you, that say don't ever call me again, I send them a card once a quarter. All right? So you want to have a plan? All right, so these are some of the things that you ask. Chris brought it out, you know, the questions that are important to show motivation. So we want to make sure that we have somebody that we're dealing with that is motivated. All right, now, how many of you like negotiation? Anybody? Excellent. This is one of my favorite negotiating tools. All right? Pretty simple, isn't it? But do you realize that it may be the only question you need to ask about the price? Because it's so simple. And what did you do? You didn't really ask them to go down on their price, did you? You just asked them what would it take to do the deal. So be aware that you don't have to. How many people feel uncomfortable about asking an individual, how much do you owe on your mortgage? Are you current on your mortgage? Those are very important questions, because if you don't know, you're going to get in a problem because you're not going to have the right paperwork in order to go to the attorney. All right? So this is my property profile. If I am talking to another investor, I only have to ask 3 questions. And I can make a decision, a good solid business decision, on whether or not this is a deal or no deal. So I need to know how many beds, how many baths, and the location. Why? Because just because it's on Main Street doesn't mean that it's on the good side of Main Street. So you need to be aware of where it is on the streets. The next thing is you need comparables. And I'm going to give you some resources that are free in your price point. All right, even though you have $1 million right now. And then we need to know about the repairs. Now, I want you to know that when we're talking to people about the repairs, they're going to say, oh, it's in great condition. Well, great. What color's the carpet? Oh, it's kind of a green and it's shag. Well, you might want to replace that, right? When was the kitchen last updated? Well, when we moved in. How long ago did you move in? 12 years ago. Oh, that might be something we would want to repair. And you don't need to get good at the repairs on April. I will give you some tips on how to make repair estimates on the phone. All right? And then the spreadsheet is something that I'm also going to give away in April, and that's the calculations. That's so it makes it real easy. All you do is put in the top set of numbers and it spits it out what you can offer on the bottom. All right? Now, this is the property. You want to know whether or not it's a condominium or a multifamily. You want to know what the HOA is, because that'll help you understand how to structure it. Now, remember back when I was first talking about that you're the middleman. You have to structure the deal for the people that you're going to be selling to. You have to put the shoes on of the people that you're selling to. Make sense? Because if you don't, you're not going to leave them enough money or profit, or you're going to send them down the wrong road. Make sense? Okay. So we need to know all of this information. And the most important, of course, is the repairs. That's the one I really drill down on. All right? So most of you are scared of making offers, but guess what? We've all gotten a little bit skinned up, and I'm going to talk to you just about 2 clauses that you must have in your agreements in order to get out, especially if you made a bad offer. And how do you know you made a bad offer? The way you know, it doesn't sell. Exactly, Paul. You put it out on the market and you hear this. Yeah, it's all silent, nothing comes back. That's a bad deal. You need to go back and restructure it. You need to get a better price. Did you have a question? Okay. All right, so we're going to be talking about exactly how to drill down in order to get that. All right, you've got to have equity. But you also can sell a lease option. How many of you ever thought about selling a lease option? Yeah. Okay, great. Great. I'm glad to hear that. So I'll give you an example in just a minute of how I did that. So typically, in wholesale, we're paying cash for the property. But I have recently bought from wholesalers deals that they structured that were subject to. And I like that. So if you're able to structure deals that are subject to for your buyers, then you open up a whole new field. Because how many people happen to have $70,000, $100,000 cash that can buy versus 20, 15, 10? Yeah, there's a lot more buyers that have that out there. All right? So our maximum allowable offer is very easy to figure out. You take what the after repair value is, you multiply it times a factor, which I'll give you in April. Then it gives you another number that is what the area should sell for. Then you take out the repairs and your profit, and that's how you make your maximum allowable offer. And typically in a blue-collar neighborhood, you're using a factor of anywhere from 65% to 70%. There are going to be some people that are going to blow smoke at you and say, oh no, the new number is 0.8. Let me tell you, you do that and you won't be back in this room for a while. You'll be at your job making up the difference. And the reason I say that is I want you to think about this just for a minute. What does it cost for a realtor? 6%. What does it cost for closing costs? 3, so that's 9, right? Okay, wait, there's some seller concessions like repairs and utilities and taxes and insurance and stuff like that. It winds up being almost 11% when you distill everything down. So that means if you got a $100,000 piece of property, $11,000 of it goes to somebody else, not in your pocket. And at 80% or 80% loan to value, you can see that your profit margin gets squeezed very quickly. Not a good deal. All right? So I need you to take a photograph of this. This is all of the free sites that you go to in order to get your comps. Now, my favorite is the icomps.com. Zillow. How many times have you taken and gone to a seller and the seller says, well, Zillow says, right? Well, I battle that on a regular basis. Zillow at the top has nothing to do with reality. It's simply a number that they crunch to make everybody feel good. All right, down at the very bottom is where you go in order to get the comps. Make sense for everybody? You always go to the bottom. And it takes a little bit more time. All right? So this is one of the ones that I did a lease option and wholesaled it. All right? So this is the property right here in Stockbridge. What happened is that I did my comps in the area, and I found out that the house probably would sell in tip-top shape at about 83. The person owed 68. All right? Not a really good deal, is it? No, but it gets really good now. So, all right, especially with these kind of repairs. Oh, with this right here also, that kind of turns off a lot of people. All right? But this is what it rented for, $1,000. So the way that it worked out was like this. I got subject to financing, a lease with it, another fancy way of saying a lease, and the payments were this. And the cash flow is the difference between this number and $1,000 a month. The other part of it is that the buyer that was lease optioning it had to spend $5,000 up front just to fix it up before they moved in. Why did I make them do it before they moved in? You're right. So I didn't have to evict them. No, how many times do you hear the horror story that, oh, I'll do that, and it never happens? Well, that's why you do it before you move in, because I wanted to make sure that I had somebody that was going to follow through. And this particular individual did. So what happened is that it was this amount of money to bring the payments current. Okay, so when I was lease optioning it to this other individual, I happened to get $5,000 in repairs and $5,000 cash. So that covered that. And I didn't have to do any repairs. So already I'm at a real nice price point. Does everybody get that? All right, so this is kind of where the numbers shake out. All right, I've got a real nice cash flow. I wanted to make sure they stayed there a year. So I wrote the lease for 2. All right, so this was when it started. I would have taken this amount of money out of my pocket, but I didn't. This is what the person that was leasing it from me actually had to do when the dust settled. But this is my rate of return for just structuring the paperwork. And look at this rate of return. Is that exciting? I mean, I obligated myself for this. Everybody got that? But one of the things that happened is it didn't come out of my pocket. It came out of the buyer's pocket. Okay? Yeah. Right. This is a fix-up. Yeah. Come into this great neighborhood. Yeah. 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 Go ahead.
So how did you structure this deal? Did you get the lease option agreement with the seller first, and then you just transferred that agreement or sold that agreement to an end lease?
Correct. Right.
You got basically got a $5,000 fee.
Yeah. Yeah. Ted?
So you did not buy a subject to?
Well, I got a subject to it was a lease option is what it was. So from the seller.
So who has the deed?
The buyer in the end. Okay? All right, so this is another one. Now this particular one, this is a HUD statement. And this is one that I bought from a wholesaler and immediately flipped to another end user. All right, so I'm sure that that's one of your questions. Can I wholesale a wholesaler's deal? The answer is yes. So in this particular transaction, what happened is that I bought it for, let's see, it was 125, all right? And I had to borrow the money from a transactional funder. And what happened was is that I sold it for 145 the same day. Not a bad day. All right, and the reason why I was able to do that is I knew the area, I knew it was a great house, and I knew what the repairs were, and I had somebody that I could call. You with me? Okay, all right. So it's all in the numbers. I keep talking about ratios and stuff like that. I am kind of a math kind of guy. I like that because that keeps you safe. The worst deals I have ever done, I fell in love with. So don't do that. All right, so you got to buy low, sell high. It doesn't matter if you're buying down in the war zone. It doesn't matter if you're buying in the $500,000 range. Does not matter at all. All right, the key behind it is that you want to be wholesaling. Now, last year in Atlanta, what happened is that there was a market change, and a lot of the stuff that I was doing wasn't working. And what I started doing is developing more wholesale and more wholesaling of lease options. All right, because what happens is that I'm able to step back. I'm still in the game. I still have my pulse on what's happening in the economy. I know what's buying, what's selling. I know the price points. I know what costs are because I'm still there and I have my pulse. I have my finger on the pulse. But understand that I'm not taking any risk. How much risk did I take for flipping a contract? Zero. The worst case scenario is that I could have lost my earnest money. But on this particular one, I got the earnest money out of the buyer. So I didn't have any money in it. Is that a nice thing? Yeah. So my point is that wholesale is a very low risk, and it can be done in anywhere, anytime. And when the market starts to change, my go-to is always wholesale. So you need to have a good understanding of what that is. And those of you that have done it in the past, it makes a lot of sense to continue working that. All right? So, any area, I just gave you 3 different areas, any condition. I have wholesale deals where there were no windows, no electrical, no roof, and it was a hell of a deal. Yeah, the way I sold it was like this, that if you come on a rainy day, you will have a waterfall in the master bedroom. It's what you say, not what you don't say. All right, typically what we do, these are the different ways that we structure our transactions, but understand that the zero interest, that is a leap. If you've got somebody that is pretty close to the top of the market and they can do owner financing, then that's when you would use your zero interest. You would just take their purchase price, less the down payment, and hack it up into 360 payments. All right? So we want to make sure, let's duplicate. All right? So when we are looking at properties, and they are single-family homes, they are properties that people can live in, we're going to use comparables. But when we are looking at apartment buildings, storage units, duplexes, quadruplexes, we use a different set of numbers, and that's the rent. We use different ratios for the rent. And some of you I'll give you the example, the best example, is that if the ARV is $100,000 and the house needs $50,000 in repairs, typically an individual using a 60 cents on the dollar would offer on that property somewhere around $20,000. You with me? Okay, well, I will beat them every day by using the rent rate because that house may have a super high rent rate. And I can make money off of that because the individual that I'm going to sell it to when it's done is going to be a landlord. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you've got to structure it different ways. All right? So how are you getting your contracts? Those of you that have done wholesale, how are you getting your contracts? Where'd you get them? Not all at once. Okay, it's from other gurus. Okay, I've got a collection from them. Where else? I'm sorry? Title company? Yeah, they'll give you one. Sure, because they want your business. Okay, where else? Other wholesalers? Definitely. Okay, attorneys? For sure. All right, so I want you to know that I have had wholesalers come to me that had it on a regular realtor contract. Okay, now I do not want you to do that. And the reason is that almost 40% of a realtor contract does one thing: protects the realtor, which means that you got to cross out a lot of stuff. That doesn't look good. So getting it from the other resources is definitely where you want to go in your contracts. All right, so you just mentioned all of those, okay? All right, I do have to use this as a disclaimer. You have to have everything reviewed. It keeps you out of the woods. You just can't take somebody that comes from another part of the country and use their contract, unless, of course, you get it reviewed. All right, now, these two things right here are going to save your life. You need to have them in every contract. So the story about the contingency clause is this. The contingency that I want you to have in every one of your contracts is that you have to have it inspected, and it must pass inspection. That's key, all right? So I was a mentor, flew into town. The guy had 2 houses under contract. So I immediately started to read the contract, and nowhere was there an assign or a contingency. And he had put down $2,000. Guess what? He got a $2,000 learning lesson, all right? Because after we went through and looked at the comps and looked at the area, he was paying fair market value for these properties. And his exit strategy was to wholesale it to somebody else. So he got a very heavy-duty learning lesson. My point here is that if you don't have and or assigns, and by the way, if you're buying from VA, you're buying HUD, buying from a realtor, they don't like that in their contracts. They will cross that out multiple times. So be aware that that's got to go in, because that allows you to sign it with very little cost. We'll talk about the other one if you happen to delete that, all right? No matter what, I want you to put that in your contract. All right, so here are the things that you need. How many people happen to know what carbon paper is? Do you know it still works? And if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're striking a deal on land, or you're out there doing a mountain cabin, this stuff works and will continue to work. You just got to figure out which side to put down, that's all. And I've done that. All right, so how many of you know what an information release authorization is? Anybody? Okay, a few of you. What this does is it gives permission for the bank to talk to you, not the other way around. Does that, okay? Because the seller gives the bank permission so that the bank can talk to you. All right, so one of the things that you've got to be aware of that I learned the hard way, I kept getting my information release authorizations rejected. And the reason is it didn't have my logo with my phone number and my address on the top. Now, the bank ain't going to tell you that. Why? Because they don't want to be giving this information out. But it works. Make sure you have your logo and all your information on that. All right? Memorandum of offer to purchase. Why is that important? Protects you from people going around you. Very important. So if you don't know what one looks like, you need to take a photograph and then research it. All right? So one of the things that I'm going to talk about in April is 12 different ways to find cash buyers. How many of you would like to know where cash buyers are? There are a lot of different places. All right? I'm going to give you one right now. All right? Right now. All right? You go for sold properties. All right? Now there's another key component on that. Cash. Because how many people buy houses cash that live there? Very rarely. Okay? Now you can get this from your realtor, either through the MLS service. In Atlanta there's an FMLS, but there's also other sites that sell this information. Very important. All right? So How many of you, I asked the question earlier, like to negotiate? Are these rhinoceroses butting heads or are they kissing?
Kissing.
Excellent. All right. Now, the reason I asked that question is that that's your mindset. If you think that every time you go into a negotiation that you are butting heads, what's the chances that you're going to have a good time? What's the chances of that negotiating going well? But if you come into that negotiation with an open book, kind of lovey-dovey, let's see where we can compromise, let's see where we can work together, do you think that the outcome is going to be a lot more positive? Of course. Of course. All right, so the negotiation is this. You have to have a buyer that is liquid and has cash. If they don't have cash, then they have to have a line of credit. If they don't have that, then they have to have access through a hard money lender. All right, so how many of you are going to be embarrassed to ask the buyer, the potential buyer of the property, show me your money? I have to have proof of funds before I can show you the house. How many people have ever tried that one? Can I make a suggestion? Do you see how much simpler your life would be if you said that? Yeah. And guess what? A lot of people are just going to hang up on you, but guess what? You dodged a bullet. And the other cool thing about it is you will know whether or not another wholesaler is trying to wholesale your property because they're not going to have the money. Is that good? Yeah. See, this game is so much fun. That's why I like it. All right. So you need a buyer's profile sheet. You need to have some kind of database that you build. Outlook is a very good database to use. In my world, it says here, what kind of investment do people want? For some odd reason, every time I put somebody in, I don't care what they want because they have children, they have parents, and one day they're going to need what I'm selling. Does that make sense? Now, I will tell you that I have my land group. I do have my commercial group, but duplexes, condos, townhouses, single families, they're all in the same bucket, right? Okay. So just be aware of how to organize yourself. All right, so think of this. How many people in the room happen to, when you're wholesaling, go out to find the house first rather than the buyer? How many people? Okay, there's a few of you. Okay. But there is another philosophy. You find the buyer and then you go look for the property. Okay? Finding the buyer first and then the house, or the house and then the buyer. It doesn't matter. It works both ways. All right? This one, when you find your buyer, you've got to make sure that they've got the money, because you do not want to be hunting property for somebody that doesn't know what they want to buy. So how do you do that? When you're talking to your buyers, you got that property profile sheet, you're asking them their questions, and if they say they buy all over, they don't buy all over. That they buy in this particular price point, they probably do. But if they buy in that price point in this side of town versus the other side of town, too far to drive, they don't want to manage it. So you need to be aware and get that information. All right? So I was going to tell you about an assignments versus the double close. All right? When to use it, when not to use it. My favorite rule is this. If you are doing assignments with strangers, people that you don't have an intimate personal relationship with, you do it all day long. The only time that you don't do it with an individual that is a stranger that you would want to use for a double closing is when they nibble on your profit. If they are going to say, whoa, Malachi, dude, you're making 20 grand off me? And they start to nibble on you, that's when you double close. Everybody got it? Okay, now on the other side, you will always double close with friends and family because they are always going to nibble and they don't want you to make a profit off of them. Okay? Is that a true statement? Yeah. I know some of you, you're not admitting it, but it's true. All right, so I just gave you when and why. All right, let's talk about dry versus wet. All right, back about 10 years ago, an attorney would be able to do a double closing in the same within the same hour, and they would use the money, the funding from the buyer in order to fund the whole transaction, including you buying it from the seller. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, that's called a wet closing. All right. Now, a dry closing is just what it sounds like. When you're purchasing it from the seller and you don't have the money, it's dry. So you need to have transactional funding if you don't have enough money in your pocket, or you don't know the clause that I do. So the point I'm driving at is that dry closing, you can no longer use the buyer's money in order to fund the whole transaction and your profit. Okay? That's the difference between wet and dry. All right? So those of you that have been wholesaling, what kind of profit have you been making recently? Anybody? What do you make? 10 to 15,000, that's a good number. I like that number. All right, so my largest wholesale deal was 45,000. I had a student named Regina, and she smoked me. She did 60 grand on one transaction. I had another student named Ken. He happened to make 50. All right? But point here is that you'll make as much as you believe you can. Make sense? Because it's all up here. All right? So since they've done that, I've made more. All right? Now, the reason that when we do a double close, that we have to make the higher amounts of money is because we have expenses, because there's two closings. You'll have to have title for both. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention in that slide with the double close. I was in a closing with a commercial group. We were selling an apartment building. And it was kind of fun because we had the seller, and then we had a wholesaler, me, a wholesaler, and the guy that was bringing the money. Okay, there was plenty of money in this transaction. Okay, so what happened was that I always get title insurance, even if I own it for a nanosecond. Now that's a key. All right, the second thing that happens is I always get insurance, and that's where those expenses come in. Because if it burns down, has anybody in the room ever had an insurance claim? Everybody in the room ought to be raising their hands, right? You always had one. Right, okay, what's the rules with insurance companies? Do they pay, or do they just like collecting premiums? So if you've got an insurance policy, then you're protected. Make sense? Okay, so what happened is that this buyer that brought the cash did a wonderful renovation on it. He got the place filled up with lots of good tenants. Everything was going great, and 2 years later, he decided to sell. And he was going to make a handsome profit. The problem was there was an IRS lien on the property. So here's how it went down. The seller didn't have the IRS property. One of the two people that was wholesaling it had a title property. And when the IRS found out that they were wholesaling and they had an income stream, they wanted a piece of it. I had title insurance. I didn't have a problem. I didn't lose one bit of sleep. This buyer was not a happy camper, and neither were those two other wholesalers. Make sense? Protect yourself at all costs. It's cheap. All right, so let's talk about this. All right, I happen to mentor this guy, Trey Man, and in less than 30 days he came up with earning $16,000. And Leonard, he made $15,000 in less than 30 days after I started working with him. It's easy enough to do. If you have contacts, and oh, by the way, this thing right here is your first free lead generator. You need to call everybody in this phone and ask them, hey, do you know anybody that wants to sell a house that's not listed with a realtor? And I'm talking about even your old boyfriends and girlfriends. They will remember you. Yeah, everybody in your phone. And that's the only question you ask. And that's the only question you text. I'm in the market to buy. And if you happen to have, how many people do you have in your phone? I've got 3,500. Do you think that I can come up with a house once a month on 3,500? Do you think that some of those other people that don't really want to talk to me have canceled out? Yeah, but I'm constantly building that list. All right? Caleb made 16 grand in less than 46 days. The port I'm driving at is, I mentioned Ton earlier, she built a portfolio of $500,000 in less than a year. I'm good at what I do. I know a good deal from a bad deal. I understand how to structure them. One of my first deals that I ever put together was back when Jimmy Carter was president, a long time ago. And that was when Reaganomics, that was when inflation and interest rates were at 17%. I was putting deals together as a realtor that used bass boats and bird dogs. That was the earnest money and the down payment. And you have to be real creative when the interest rates are 17%. My point is that the more creative you are and the better you are at problem solving, you will come up with some wonderful opportunities. Now, I'm going to break with just a moment here in thought that I have a individual that is a competitor. We talk on a regular basis. He is very narrow in his scope. He only does cash deals. He does not know how to do anything else creatively. It's always a cash deal. And the guy does a great job. So you can become and earn over 6 figures just doing cash deals. All right? Me, I have dyslexia and ADD. I do this for that one and that one for that one and that one. Oh, look at that. So my point is that I can't focus like that. I have to have a lot of other things going on. All right? So these criteria right here make the perfect wholesaler. So I want to know whether or not you have some of these traits. You have to be able to get out of bed in the morning. You have to be a self-starter. Why is that necessary? Because nobody's going to tell you, and nobody's going to call you up with that wake-up call. That's not how it works. It's all dependent on you taking action. All right? Now, it is plan your work and work your plan. There are many people that put together a New Year's resolution, and then as soon as they put it together, they throw it out and forget about it. No, you have to work that plan. But you are allowed to make changes on it daily. And that's the important part. When you're working your plan, make sure that you are getting a response back from the community and where the market is in order to make slight changes. I told you earlier, I realized that there was a market change in Atlanta last year. So I immediately started doing different things in my marketing in order that I could do more wholesale. Right now, Alan happened to mention that Chattanooga is very strong. I believe that Chattanooga will continue to be strong for at least another 12 months. And the reason is that you've got jobs coming in. You're a conservative market. You didn't go willy-nilly. You've had some really nice appreciations, but it's going to go kind of flat, somewhere about 3 to 5%. And after that, it's going to go pretty much down to 3. But my point here is that you can still do the buy, fix, and sell in that market. And a flat market, it gets a little bit tighter. All right? So this one right here is very important to me, that you've got to understand that you've got to value what comes out of your mouth. You can poison your own water. I have been at negotiations, and I had bought a house recently from a seller, and he said, well, give me, let's see, we were talking about trashing out the house, because his house, he was a hoarder. So what happened was that I said, you got to take all this trash out. And he says, no, I don't want to do that. I said, okay, so I'm going to have to drop the price in order to do that. What do you think would be fair? He said, well, maybe $1,000. I said, sold. Did I come up with the number? No, but I knew in my head what the number was, because I've trashed out enough houses. But my point here is that you've got to listen to the words that come out of your mouth. When you're negotiating and you make the offer, shut up. Don't talk anymore. Let them come back to you. All right? The other thing about it is that if you talk nasty about all your competitors and all your other people, that isn't going to work, because that'll come out when you're in front of your seller, accidentally. It'll come out. All right. You got to be able to work well, develop relationships. That's the part that I want. The other thing is working with a coach and a mentor. I can guarantee you, well, those of you, how many people have been in the real estate business for 2 years or longer? Excellent, okay. So did you guys take some formal education in doing that? Great. Okay, how many of you went to the School of Hard Knocks? Yeah, absolutely. I've done it. But I can guarantee you, when you go to the School of Hard Knocks, you pay more for the tuition than you ever thought. And the pisser is, nobody recognizes the diploma. So you have a choice. You're going to pay for it today, or you're going to pay it later. But you will pay for your education one way or another. All right? Last thing is action takers. You've got to follow through. I understand that the first step is always the hardest step. You know, there's always a reason why not you can't take that step. But once you take it, then it becomes easy, and then you can look back and go, oh, look, I did that. All right? So let's talk about an action plan. You can build your dreams and go to the mountaintop. You can raise your dreams to the point where you have expectations. You've set the goals that you want to do 2 houses a month. You want to do 3 houses a month. Well, you need to understand how much work goes involved into that. And if you happen to have a day job, that makes it a little bit harder. People that are self-employed can do 3 or 4 houses. Somebody that is employed with another job can do it, but they've got to hire people to help them. So there is a good way to skin the cat. You can allow your business just to go in the toilet. You know, great thing. You can walk out of here and do absolutely nothing. And is your life going to change? Absolutely no. You have to make a change in order to allow your life to go in a different direction. Doesn't need to be much. It really doesn't. 3 phone calls. 3 phone calls will turn into 4. How many of you go to the gym? Do you know that the hardest part of going to the gym is getting out of bed to get in the car or get on the bicycle and walk or go to the gym? But once you're there, it's not that bad, right? The hardest part is taking that first step. All right, so realize that it is you that motivates you. You're responsible for your success. Nobody else is. And you can go to the mountaintop, or you can just let your life languish. All right, now, here is kind of a plan. So if you want to get a jump start on what you need to be doing, go ahead and take a screenshot of that. You are going to need to have scripts. Part of what's going to happen in April is that you will be able to get some scripts. All right? You know, how many of you believe that you can start your phone ringing in 7 days? Yeah, definitely. It's an amazing business. You can have nothing going on today and then have 5, 10 phone calls the next day. And one of them's a deal. I mean, it's so exciting. All right? Here's your action items. You need to be doing this. And once you take these steps, again, your business is going to take off. You need to constantly be making offers. How many of you in the room have ever bought a house without making an offer? See? I mean, that's a simple philosophy. But some of us are so afraid of making an offer, we don't. Well, how can you buy a house if you don't make an offer? Yeah, yep. All right, so in the wholesaling, is you always are looking for buyers. You're always looking for sellers. You know, you get a contract along with your assignment, 2 sheets of paper. All right, get paid, and then do it again. All right, it's very good money. All right, so what's next? Wholesale 101, you're going to learn a lot more about it. I do have the wrong date. That date is not the Saturday, it's the 13th. Yeah. Right, the 13th. One of the things that we're going to be talking about is finding cash buyers. We're going to do scripts. We're going to sell stuff in the room, show you how to figure out what the numbers are. There's going to be a lot of interaction. I don't believe in lecturing. I believe in adult education. And the best way to have adult education is to immerse you in what it feels like to actually go through a transaction. All right? So the other thing is we're going to be talking about some of the clauses that you want so you can have a wet transaction. That clause is going to save you a boatload of money. All right. We also go into contracts and some of the properties that you may want to avoid because they're a lot harder to sell. All right. Think about this, that with everything that I'm giving you here, what kind of price tag would you put on that? And again, I've made millionaires, I've supported millionaires, I have the techniques in adult education, and it's going to be a fun day. Come on out, I'd love to have you. And we don't have a price on it yet, but LeRon LeGrand, when he comes into town, this is the kind of things that he talks about. All right? We're not going to be at that price point, are we?
Not quite.
Okay. All right. So I don't know at what price we are going to be at. So these are some of the nice things that people have said to me that I have trained and worked with in the past. The other thing is that you can hope and pray, but my grandfather told me you can hope in one hand or spit in the other one. And which one are you going to get more out of? Yeah, it's kind of gross, but it really sticks with you.
Your hand's going to
The
be
point
wet.
I'm trying to say is you can hope and pray all you want. Prayer is a good thing, don't get me wrong. But it does not take to action, all right? Getting an education is huge, all right? Because nobody can ever take that education away from you. And one of the people that I mentored, their whole purpose for spending the money that they did to have a mentor come out and train them was to be the very first person in their family through 12 generations to own a home. Now, that's quite a big ticket to do that, but do you realize what it was like for them to sit at the table and then be able to invite their family to come into their home that they owned? And nobody else in their family could do it. Yeah. So I want you to get on fire. I want you to get on fire for your business and become passionate about what you want. Only do the parts of the business that you enjoy. All right? Hire the other stuff out. But the whole point of it is if you're not having fun doing this, then you don't need to be doing it. You need to be doing something else. All right, I'm going to tell you a quick story about Tan. When Tan and I first got together and she hired me as a mentor, she didn't really know what she was getting into. All right, so I'd take her to these houses and I could tell that she hated ugly houses. She hated them. She didn't like the way they smelled. She didn't like the housekeeping. She didn't like traipsing through them. She never ever got underneath the house or went up into the attic. And if there was like piles of junk here and piles of junk here, she'd just kind of walk, and she didn't like it. So then one day, this other opportunity of lease options came along, and she could start wholesaling pretty houses. And she loves that, and she is doing gangbusters. The point I'm driving at is you don't need to have ugly houses where you get dirty when you walk in. I remember one time I was doing a presentation at a house, and as I was about to sit down, I went like this to get the roaches off of the furniture. I did not allow my briefcase or any of my tools to touch anything. I had them in my lap. It was not a pretty sight. My point here is that doesn't bother me. I know how to work with that. Okay? But Tan couldn't handle it. So she found the niche that she liked. She's very successful at it, and that's what you need to do. You need to figure out what you like about houses and go for it. All right? Any questions? There's got to be one. Yeah.
Do you ever use options instead of purchase and sale agreements to one of these properties?
Yes. In 2010, 11, 12, and 13, I used pretty much, I would say 40% options. Because I was just locking them down and praying. Locking them down and praying. And I was putting down money on each option.
That worked pretty well.
Bam! I recovered very nicely. What's that?
Would it work in today's?
It works really well when you have 6 to 10% increase. When you're in a 3 to 5, your options have to go 5 years. Your options really have to go far out. Yeah, but it's an excellent tool. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're doing cold calling.
Sure.
With a lead, and you
you don't get them on the phone and they're not wanting to sell, but they sound interested, they're asking questions, but that's as far as they want to go. How long do you wait before you
Call them back?
second time?
I typically call 6 times. All right. If I don't get an answer, I call back 6 times. If I talk to them, then I'm going to be, I will call them back probably every 45 to 2 months, 45 days to 60 days. And it's just a real quick, hey, how are you doing? This is Russ. You remember me? I was asking about you wanting to sell your house. Do you want to sell your house? Okay, that's great. Do you know anybody else that wants to sell their house that's not listed with a realtor? See, do you believe in the philosophy that dogs sleep with dogs and you have fleas, right? Okay? That means that if somebody's getting in trouble, that person's going to know about it. Okay? Because you hang out with like-kind people. All right? Yeah, Chris?
A couple of questions. The first one is, let's say your seller, they want earnest money from you.
Yeah. Okay, so the scenario was this. The individual wanted $100. And in my contract, it said $20. He said, oh no, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. I need $100. I need $100. I said, no problem. What I'm going to do is you have a choice. I will give you $20 cash, or I will give the closing agent the $100. Because I don't know about you, but I can't walk away from $100. All right? I can walk away from 20, but not 100. And do you know this guy needed cigarette and beer money, so he took the 20? Yeah, understand, the minute you give your earnest money to the seller, not this guy, not Paul, but the seller, it is gone. You with me? I also had another individual that they were working with a franchise that has this caveman on it, and they couldn't close the deal. And those individuals had given that seller $1,000, all right? And they couldn't close the deal, and they lost that $1,000. So I come along, and I'm with that seller, and I say to that seller, look, I will place $100 with the closing agent. And she said, well, the caveman gave me $1,000 cash. And I said, great. I'm going to take my $1,000 and spend it finding the attorney and the people that are going to clean up this title so that we can get it closed. That's my investment. Now, you can do it your way, or we can do it my way, and you're going to make money. Which one do you want? Now, how many people felt that that was very hard? That was conflict? No. If somebody says no to you, the only reason they're saying no is because you haven't explained it well enough to them in their language and shown them the value that you provide. Make sense? Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Chris?
Another question. You ever get any kickback or flack from agents, real estate agents, or just like I've had one agent,
You were wholesaling it?
I was wholesaling it.
When you were using a realtor? You can't, the realtor was representing the house.
No, I knew a realtor who may have been able to bring in a buyer, and they looked at the property, and like, there's this and this going on, and there's all this, with the building, and there's some liabilities here. It's like, really what you're doing, you're selling real estate, you should just get your real estate license, and trying to get me to be a realtor with his firm.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
I have gotten pushback from realtors and even from buyers. And I remember one time that I was sitting at the table. I had shown them the contract. I had shown them how much money that I was making, and they didn't like how much money I was making. And they said, well, Russ, I'm going to change my price. And I said, no, we agreed upon this. And, this deal isn't for you. I grabbed my stuff, got up, started walking out, and would you believe before I hit the door, he was ready to sign that paper. Now, I was ready to walk because I had other people. I had confidence. Make sure. But here's part, I need to tell you this. I'm Russ Hiner, and I'm an ex-control freak. You need to be in control of the contract. You need to be in control of your seller. You need to be in control of your buyer. If you are not, the chances of you getting paid goes down. And I'm sure the people that have done the wholesale in the room can agree with that. And it's making sure that everybody knows their rules, making sure that everybody knows their role. And your life gets really easy, real simple. All right, anybody else? Yeah.
Which list are you getting the most amount of retails from? How are you filming it?
Okay, I use lists from ListSource. I use foreclosure. I use probate. I have a virtual assistant that screens it, and I have 5 cold callers.
So which one do you find more?
It depends on the time of the year. This past month in January, December and January, I had my best months with foreclosure. In August of last year, it was probate, and then in April, May, June, it was skip tracing. Yeah. Go ahead.
If I'm straight, just cold calling, what do you say would be and I'm trying to assess like how successful I am, what would you say would be like a good conversion rate?
Good conversion rate is 1 in 100, 3%. No. You're going to wind up getting somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 appointments out of 100. And then out of that 20, you're actually going to get it distilled down to maybe 3 transactions. Okay? Yeah. Abel?
What type of skip trace services do you use?
I use an expensive one. Yeah. There's a couple out here that you can use, but it's like they'll give you 25 per month. And I need more money than that.
Do you use my skip tracer?
I have not. No. How many can you do per month? Okay. Well, then it's probably a paid. Yeah. But the free ones, they limit you on the number. And it just depends on whether or not you're full-time or part-time. Start out, if you know nothing about skip trace, start out with the free ones. And then when you actually increase your overhead to this massive thing, then you hire people. All right, anybody else? Yeah.
I don't quite understand lease options or substitute. Could you elaborate?
Okay. Lease option, the best thing to think about is a rent-to-own program. All right? So in the pretty house business, the down payment for that option is typically 3% to 10% of the purchase price. Okay? If you're doing the old-time lease option that I was doing, where you're using a renter's mentality, that would be first month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit. And typically those lease options fail. The ones with the pretty house, because you're asking for a lot of money and a big chunk of money, those are going to succeed. All right? And then you asked about subject to, was it? Or, okay. So a subject to is like this. Think of this, that in the title, typically there is a mortgage, there's taxes, there are mechanics liens, okay, right? So what I'm doing is I'm buying that title subject to all of that stuff. I get all of that when I'm buying.
Don't you, when you sell a property, the note comes due?
Well, typically they do, yeah. That's the way the mortgage company has written it, sure. But there is a way to go around it, and the rich people thought about it. And that way is either through a land contract or putting it into an LLC. So you have to have an extra step in order to do a subject to. All right? Yeah. All right, one more question, then I got to wrap it up. Okay, go ahead.
I'm from Nashville, but I go to school at UTC. So you talked about earlier how you can wholesale a property that you haven't seen, and I was just wondering how you can market to an end buyer a property that you have no pictures of.
Oh, you make the seller take the pictures for you.
Okay.
They got a phone, just like you do, right? And they know how to take pictures. They do selfies all the time.
What if the end buyer asks to be present and see the house?
No, they always do. So you make a deal with the seller and you make sure you have all this paperwork so that they can't go around you. Okay? So the way I do it is very simple. If I want to take a vacation in Florida, I start marketing in Florida. And I come back with more money than I did when I went down there. Because I do a transaction and write the whole thing off. Then if I don't sell one down there or not able to buy one, I don't go there. I go someplace else. All right, so my question to you is this. What are you going to do with $1 million? Are you going to invest it in your business? Are you going to invest it in something that depreciates and evaporates? Are you going to invest it in yourself? It's up to you. You have it. You now have all of the secrets. And I look forward to having you text Alan and let him know that you're interested in signing up for the Wholesale 101. Thank you.